Okay, welcome everyone. This is our fourth episode of this podcast, Unvaccinated and Healthy podcast. And today we have another amazing guest, Steven. Oh, by the way, Steven, I didn't ask, how do you pronounce your last name? It is Macek, right?
Well, that depends. It depends where you're from. So my father was born in Czechoslovakia, and so back in the old country they would say Macek.
Okay.
But in Australia, he came to Australia when he was just a very small boy. You know, these names get softened and anglicised. So over here we say Macek.
Macek, Steven Macek.
So you were in between. You were kind of in the middle of both those options. So that
Okay, but it's great to have you here. And by the way, guys, because it is important to have people from all over the world participating in this podcast, because as we were saying in the other episode, it is like we live in two worlds. And these two worlds are basically that some people, and I'm going to make the case for these people. If you work, for example, just in a factory, and you go to work, and then you see the news in the TV, and then you hear some news in the radio, you talk to your friends, and you have some perception of one reality. There is this big threat to all humanity around the world. You need to do this and you do that, and then all your friends also do the same, and then you don't even think about there is another reality. And so one of the things we try to make with this podcast, it is to realize that there is another reality. And so it is great to have you here, Steven, because Australia is being one of the big surprises right now with all this madness, because I don't know, but for all of us who knew about Australia was just like a nice place, maybe hot, but a nice place with nice people. And then some images were starting to come out about people yelling at others, people beating others, and the police just hanging some people just for wanting to be out there in the park, just for wanting to go out in the streets. And we were starting to say, what is happening there? So it is great having you with us, Steven. And how it is to be an unvaccinated citizen in Australia these days.
Well, it's hard to say. I don't know if I'm the only one. Sometimes if you listen to the news, you'll think you're the only person. But I think the reality is a bit different. Like you, well, for starters, yeah, great to join you on this podcast episode. I think it's a fantastic little project that you've started. So, yeah, I hope that goes well for you. In terms of COVID experience and the pandemic in Australia, I was quite surprised too. Not necessarily how governments responded, because there's long saying my whole life in Australia that we've got a nanny state. Right, the nanny state wants to look after everybody, and you've got a large portion of the population that want the government to take care of them. I think one of the the bits of insight from the last couple of years is that I didn't realise just how big a proportion of the population that was. It turns out it's a lot more people than I perhaps thought. So maybe just by way of background, just to let the audience know. So I'm in my late 40s. I was born in Melbourne. I've lived here most of my life. When I was younger, we kind of the family lived in New Zealand for a short time, and I also did a year of high school in California as a teenager. But apart from that, my whole life centered around Melbourne. If I think back to early 2020. So at that time, I was working for a large American company in the insurance industry. So as you got through sort of Christmas 2019 into January 2020, there'd be a lot of chatter in the office. There'd be clients calling up, wanting to know about what's this COVID thing? Am I covered under my travel insurance? I've got staff working overseas, and they're getting certain bits of information on the ground over there. So there was lots of communications coming out from an insurance perspective. And of course, you're watching what's happening on the news. And then, there's obviously some scary images on the TV throughout February, from places like Northern Italy and New York. My company, we did a test run of, getting the whole company to work from home at one point in early March. And then it was only about a week after that, the Australian government and the state government of Victoria, which is the state that Melbourne's in, said you must work from home unless you're in one of these essential industries. So we were kind of geared up for that, and I felt okay about that at the start because I can try and give people the benefit of the doubt that, look, okay, so we're dealing with something new, it's strange, everybody just take a deep breath, hold your positions, right? We're just going to wait and see how this pans out. But then from my perspective, once we got through sort of that March, April, May period, take that couple of months, by my reading, there was enough sort of information coming out of these overseas jurisdictions in terms of who this, the virus, the disease was affecting which groups of the population, if they were really elderly or they were frail, they had underlying health issues. So this really didn't seem like it was going to be a concern for working age healthy people, which is the group that me and all my friends would fit into. So, and then things kind of took a nasty turn. We had a lockdown, and then we came out, and then we went back into lockdown around June. But this time it was much nastier, right? The language that our leaders were using was much more aggressive. Again, just by way of background, in my university days, I studied philosophy and psychology. So I started recognizing all these psychological techniques in their communication. They were using fear as a mechanism of control. They were frightening people into submission. And then you'd have some of these viral videos go around. You mentioned the police doing heavy-handed things, and it's really getting broadcasted and promoted. And even if you take it at face value that these are authentic incidents, and maybe where a reaction was required by the police, the way they were being amplified, this kind of small minority of incidents, was really quite frightening at the time. You think, what's going on? Where am I living? This is not, this is not the country I thought I was born and raised in. So I jump in at any time with questions too. Otherwise, I'll just kind of take through that journey as we move through 2020.
Yeah, but it is amazing because in almost, well, not every other country, but in many other countries, the percentage of population that already took the vaccine, it is much lower. And you live in some of the countries with the highest percentage of vaccinated people. So, if here in Mexico, in our case, my wife and I, my family, my sister, her boyfriend, some friends, we belong to a minority, but it is not as a minority as you in Australia. So, and here, for example, for us, we don't have any problem by going to anywhere we want or doing anything we want or to work or anything. But for you guys, it's been, I think, much more difficult. How has been for you in terms of the impact on your life, on your work, on your relations by living on this station there in Australia?
Okay, good question. So I'll kind of pick up where I was. So in terms of professionally, it hadn't cost me anything because we're white collar employed. My partner and I was able to change jobs last year as well and get paid more money. I hadn't missed a day of work, except by choosing if I chose to quit a job or leave. So it does place some restrictions on certain industries I can't go into because they have vaccine requirements to work in that industry, regardless of whether or not if you're working from home. So there's still some strange things going on in that regard. It did change. So we changed where we lived, right? So we moved, right, in late 2020, because when we had these stringent lockdown restrictions, they had a distinction between what was the city, what was metropolitan, and what was country or regional. So we moved an hour outside of Melbourne. Just packed up a truck, rolled up the hill, and got out of town so we could enjoy a bit more freedom, as it were. And this is one of the things that when I mentioned earlier, some of the measures that were put in place that really quite shocked me. They put this border up between the city and the country. They called it the Ring of Steel, right? So the government, the state premier comes on TV, so we're putting up a ring of steel to stop city people leaving and going to the country, because city people are all diseased, and we don't want you spreading your filth to these clean regional areas. So I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd pass through a police checkpoint to get out of the city. So you had police, roadblocks, checkpoints set up on all these major freeways, and you'd have to show you need a permit, paperwork to be able to pass through. And it was, the nature of the city in Melbourne. You've got a lot of people who they might live outside of the city, like the tradespeople especially, and they're always coming back and forth. They're going in and out to wherever work is. So you've got people moving around all the time. So the government had to quickly put in this permit system so that, authorised or quote unquote essential people could keep operating. And so I found that quite confronting.
Okay.
But then also some of the inconsistencies in the rules that they put in place, right? So what was essential and what's not. So we had one point here in Victoria where churches were all forced to close because churches were bad. You can't have people congregating in churches because they'll spread disease and filth. But brothels were allowed to stay open. So we're just kind of living in this topsy-turvy world. So then in terms of going back to your question, there have been times when, we've been unable, as an unvaccinated person. You can't go to a restaurant. You can't go to a retail store. Like you can only order takeaway food, for example, to have delivered to you, or have, buy some clothes or whatever online and have it delivered to you. That's not the case anymore, right? So all of those restrictions are sort of lifted by early this year, I guess. Maybe it was April this year. So you kind of had, in a mixed bag over a couple of years, a series of different restrictions that, were kind of skewed towards the unvaccinated once the vaccines became sort of widely available and were rolled out. But there is, so in a different state in Australia, and I don't know if this is kind of news that's reached you, where you are, Paolo, but so in a northern state, Queensland, where they had this is the education department, teachers, right? So in the education, government had a vaccine mandate up there. There's a certain proportion of teachers who didn't take it, so they were put on leave without pay, and they couldn't work. Throughout the time that those restrictions were in place. Those restrictions were lifted in June, so they're now okay to go back and they can teach. But what the government up there announced just last week is that those teachers that didn't get vaccinated, they're going to have their pay reduced for 16 or 18 weeks by a certain percentage, just as punishment for not doing what they were told, right? So they're allowed to teach now, but they're going to suffer a financial penalty for the choice that they made about, their own body and their own health.
And that's crazy because it is, I don't think at what moment in history of humanity it's been more clear that the apparent purpose of doing something, it is not that real purpose. I mean, it was supposed to be about health. And now it is like, okay, you're healthy, but if you're not complying, then you're going to be punished. And so it is not about health. And by the way, I remember once we were talking, I remember you have your own personal story on health, and you are someone who takes care of his own health. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think it's probably something that we mentioned previously. So I'd always been quite an active person, outdoor, always very sporty. I rode at a high level. I rode as a lightweight when I was competing. So, I had a dietitian. I had to eat certain things at certain times of the day. I always sought natural remedies if I had an issue. Like I didn't like taking drugs. And obviously, when you're an athlete, you need to be careful of what drugs you can and can't take because some things contain certain things that are banned, etc. So, you sort of watch that. And so I was always more inclined to pursue sort of natural therapies, acupuncture and, naturopathy and, physio and that kind of thing. So I sort of, I don't put Panadol in my body.
Oh,
right? I'm not.
Yeah, that's great because, one of the other things that I've been seeing about how the unvaccinated have been labeled, it is that when someone in the media says something about the unvaccinated, it is like, oh, look at that crazy tinfoil conspiracy theorist and things like that. But another purpose of this podcast, it is like to show the stories, to show the people, and to show that you seem like a good guy. You seem like an educated person. You seem like someone who cares about his own health. And you have your professional studies and you have your work. And so what I wanted also to ask you, Steven, it is that being this kind of person, to take care of his own health, who is an educated person, who knows about psychology, and at what moment it was the time when you said, hey, wait a minute, there is something absolutely wrong about all this stuff. When was that moment?
So, okay, we're probably talking June 2020.
Okay.
As I said, like I'll give people the first part of 2020, right? I'll say like people were legitimately frightened, a lot of scary images. This is strange stuff going on. Let's sort of kind of pull back for a bit. I didn't like, so there was that point around sort of May, June here where the language that was being used by our leaders changed and started getting a lot darker, more sinister. It was because I'd watch, in this days of the internet, I could go online, I could go on YouTube, and I could watch the leader of Singapore was putting out regular updates to the citizens over there, and he'd talk for 10 minutes or so. He was nice and calm. He'd talk to people like they're adults, and he'd just give them information. So this is what we're seeing. This is what we're intending to do. This is how you can help. Instead of being lectured to by bullies, which was the case over here, and being spoken to like we're little children. So I really didn't like that. And then, as I said, once the data started coming out, and I could see, you can see that, okay, the average age of the person dying of COVID is older than life expectancy, right? It's not. I'll be careful with my words here. Now, it has less impact on younger, healthier people. Right, they are far less likely to suffer any severe consequences. But of course, what our leaders and our media here did, and what I can see they did in lots of places around the world, they'd point to the one case. Here's a healthy 25-year-old with no underlying conditions who died. They were a triathlete, and and I'm like, okay, that's not data. That's an anecdote, right? Like you're making decisions for populations. You need to look at the population-wide data.
Yeah.
And then if I can, I'll put my tinfoil hat, my conspiracy hat on. It was around the middle of 2020 when all of a sudden I saw all these world leaders start using the same language, particularly throughout the Anglo world, right? So if I'm looking at, New Zealand, Canada, UK, etc., this is, Australia's still a Commonwealth country, and they all started saying things like, build back better. This is an opportunity to reset. And I'm thinking, it's like someone sent them an email, right? It's like they got a memo. These are the talking points for today. And, that just started to smell a bit to me. I kind of can accept that these guys, they all kind of hang out in the same clubs and they like to copy ideas off each other. But it was just a little bit too cute and a little bit too quick for my liking.
No, for me, it is amazing because as we are capable of doing some basic math, and with just the numbers that you see on the TV, you watch on the TV, and you can do your some simple calculations. And with that calculations, in the early of 2020, my question was like, who is dying? Why are they dying? Who are the ones who are more at risk? And then my first conclusion, it was like, oh, come on.
Well, it's a good point that you make too. I mentioned my psychology background, but after my psych studies, I did a master's degree in bioethics. Right, so this is the ethics and the principles associated with providing medical treatment and medical care. So it's not a research course. So it's offered the university I went to here. It's offered within the School of Philosophy. So it was an extension of some earlier studies that I'd done. So it was all sort of theoretical. But we would, there was one evening a week where our lectures would take place at a major Melbourne hospital, and we'd have like senior hospital people, administrators, doctors come and talk to us. And so we're talking about issues like informed consent and patients' rights, and what information has to be given to a patient before they agree or not to proceed with a particular course of treatment. And one of the things that stuck with me from those sessions was how authoritarian the hospital administrators were and the doctors. Like to them, it was an inconvenience that they had to explain what they were going to do to a patient. They should just be allowed to do what they thought was best. And so as the uni crowd, I was probably in my late 20s at this stage. So, and there's some mature age students there, but we're probably still like a younger cohort. And it's like we'd get into these heated debates that, like it's almost if you had this young group of like naive idealists who believed that people should have a right to determine what happened to them versus these kind of older authoritarian types who just wanted us to sit there and be quiet and do what we were told. So it was just interesting how some of those memories kind of were prompted as we sort of moved through different situations within the pandemic, especially then as we got onto the vaccination stage, where there wasn't, on my reading, there wasn't fair and balanced information being presented to provide people with a choice. It was like, you will do this or your life will be miserable. And that violated every principle of informed consent that I'd ever been taught about. And that's, it was only 15, 20 years ago. So, and it went against the Australian government's own immunisation handbook about how they defined informed consent. Informed consent can only be given in the absence of force, manipulation, coercion, and that was far from the case, as we've experienced in a lot of places in the last couple of years.
Oh, totally. And the other thing with this, it is that when you are starting seeing the data, you are starting reading more and more and more about it, you realize that there are some basic things, like, for example, it is really a need to take this treatment, or there is another way to deal with this disease. And then you make your own decision because you are a conscious people, you take care of your own health, you are really, really aware of the damage you can make. I mean, my wife and I are one of the people that if, for example, you know that you have a cold, then you use your mask even before the pandemic. Why? Because you know you are unhealthy and that you may pass that illness into someone else. So you do that, and suddenly it is like, and the other thing, it is that I belong to the tech startup world, and one of the things that on the health tech world have been working a lot on, it is like a customized, personalized medicine. And suddenly it is like the same thing for everyone now. It is like, come on, what happened? So now the one who takes care of his own health, the one who is conscious, the one who takes care of everyone else, are the ones that are the bad guys. And suddenly the personalized, the customized medicine, it is no longer the trend. Now it is the same for everyone, no matter what. It's like, come on.
Yeah, and then one of the other things that you mentioned earlier is just in terms of like police response and the way that the unvaccinated were being portrayed. Because I was feeling quite, always been quite an independent, let's say freedom-loving person. Like I just want the government to leave me alone. I want to take responsibility for my own life and my own circumstances, and I want to make choices. Try different things. As you're in the tech startup world, you try things. Some work, and a lot of them don't. But you learn from the things that don't work, and then you change your approach for the next thing. So I just was struggling with this idea. I've got a few close friends, my partner, that have remained unvaccinated throughout. Most of my family's got vaccinated, and that's fine. There's no issues there. It's not my place to tell other people what to do with their body. I just want the same courtesy extended to me. But yeah, you could start to feel quite isolated at times, and I'm thinking I can't be the only person in Melbourne that feels that sort of what's going on is wrong. And then I'd start hearing on the news about the protests that were taking place. And they're always portrayed as it's a couple hundred people, they're crazy, far right, extremist, whack jobs. And I just didn't believe that was the case. So I thought, I'm going to go along. I'm going to see with my own eyes, who is attending these protests. I've never been politically motivated before. I've never gone to a protest before the last couple of years. And so I started going along. And these things were like street parties. Like there was music and there's singing and dancing, and there's grandmothers there walking with their grandchildren, and there's mothers pushing prams, and there's families walking, and there's people taking their dogs along. Like these were really, really positive vibe coming from these gatherings. So that was a good source of getting a bit of, say, like emotional and psychological reinforcement that you might be in a minority in a place like Australia, as you mentioned earlier, but it's bigger than they might have you believe, And there's a lot of, the other thing I noticed, right, that the people that were there, they all looked really healthy. Like they're all,
And they are the
they're all
crazy ones.
they're all kind of slim and fit, and got healthy skin, and they're smiling, and it was really weird. If I listen to the news, we get a police chief on talking about these bat-wing crazy conspiracy extremists. That if you go into the protest in town tomorrow, we're going to get you because you're an extremist. And so I'd go in and I'm walking around and I'm asking all these people, like I'll ask this mother with her baby, sorry, I have a little child. I'm sorry, are you an extremist? I heard there'd be a lot of extremists in town today. Have you seen them? Do you know where they are? I can't find them. It was a nice reprieve from some of the doom and gloom. So and then I attended a number of the rallies after that.
Oh,
with a couple of friends that were going along. It became a nice social thing to see some friends and meet some new people as well.
Oh, and maybe this happened also to you in some way, that we are also in the same, are aligned with you in the sense that we want just for government to leave us alone. We are responsible people, we educate ourselves, we keep track of the information, not only here, but all over the world, and we want to be good citizens. And so with that, we were kind of detached for what was happening around us. But thanks, and even for the political sphere, I was like, oh, crazy politicians, I don't care about them. Do whatever you want, just leave me alone. And that was it. But right now, it is kind of, no, it is not just, we can't just let them do what they want to do. Because we were impacted during this pandemic in several ways, but it is not again just to say, okay, let the government to do whatever they want. No. I mean, I think during these 2.5 years, it's been the time when the governments, the facade, the mask that the government had, just it was really present for every one of us, and that has changed a lot for all of us about the perception, about being active with the community, not just passive citizens. Good, but passive citizens.
I agree completely, and that's there's a saying, you get the leaders you deserve, and a lot of people, I've been happy my own life, just doing my own thing, minding my own business, having looking after family, friends, going to work, trying to stay fit and healthy, all the things that we're talking about here. And the political process is something that kind of happens over there, and there's some people that turn up on the TV and they give a speech, and maybe they say something interesting or maybe they don't, but that's all right. Just turn it off, go away. And I don't know what it was that changed at that point in 2020, whether or not for some, without getting too deep into the weeds with conspiracy theories, maybe some of them just got drunk on power. They say, wow, I can tell people to do this and they'll all do it. This is amazing, right? And then they started, here in Australia, and I understand it's been similar things going on in other countries, starting to pass more and more extreme legislation, to take more power for themselves. And so I started writing to members of parliament, and I even this is at one point in 2020, I even called the Prime Minister's office here in Australia. Actually, however the number was being shared around, and I wasn't happy with what was happening in Victoria, and I kind of wanted the Prime Minister to get off his backside and do something about it. So I call Parliament House in Canberra, and I speak to a secretary who puts me through to another secretary, who I left a strong message with her. There was no profanity. It wasn't overly aggressive like that. Just encouraging the PM to get off his butt and actually do something for the people. And then I kind of mentioned that to my father the next day, and then he tried to call as well, but by that point they just diverted everything through to voicemail. So you couldn't make that call. So and the Prime Minister, sorry, there wasn't the Prime Minister, the Treasurer, who was the most senior Victorian in the federal government at that point. He said some strong words in Parliament the next day. So they clearly got a number of phone calls, but it's all just theatre. Right, to get back to your point, that the veil of this idea that there are rules for thee but not for me, the double standard and hypocrisy that operates. So when we had a situation where state borders were closed, so family members, you couldn't travel into state to see family members, or if they were sick, or go to a funeral. But sports people and celebrities, like we had American actors flying out here to film movies, and when the question's being asked of these chief health officers at a press conference, why is it okay that they can fly in, but somebody from the next state can't come up? And they were just quite blatant. We said, well, this person, the movie industry, brings in hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So it was just about the money. Well,
that is better than a vaccine to shut down COVID.
Yeah. Well, this is again. I do think it's an interesting project that you guys are working on here with your podcast. But if I was following the news here locally, like on the 24th of February, COVID went away because Russia invaded Ukraine, right? And Vladimir Putin was going to be given the Nobel Prize for Medicine because he'd cured COVID. Everything sort of disappeared all of a sudden. Kind of, you're told the next thing that you're supposed to care about.
Yeah.
Now, it's not quite, I'm being facetious, it's not quite like that, but yeah, kind of the attention of the media shifts. There are still sort of COVID things bubbling on underneath. And I just want to get back to, one more point with our leaders and what you're saying about being, if you like, politically engaged. When some of these, in addition to writing to members of parliament here in relation to some of the legislation they were proposing, I actually tuned in to, for several days of the live stream of the debate that was taking place. And I got to say, I came away just so depressed from watching these people. I thought they are raging mediocrities, right? Like, I'm not sure there was a functioning brain cell in the room, the kind of things they were saying, and whether they believe it or not, or it's just theatre for, like we're watching a movie or something.
No, totally. And there has been a lot of issues where there are some specific facts that are almost undeniable. For example, if something it is absolutely dangerous and deadly, then if these people going through that danger, then they should be dead. And but if they're not dead, then what is happening? Right now, it is like you and I and my wife and our families and friends and all of the ones who remain unvaccinated is like, hey, we are here. And they are saying things like, no, it is thanks to the vaccine that everything's under control. And we say like, well, not exactly like that. But the point I'm trying to make with here, it is that it's been kind of shocking the level of compliance that people is being allowed to take just for not having any problem at all. But it is like a shutting down for completely even common sense and basic facts and basic math.
Yeah, and the absence of debate, right? So it's not like all scientists agree or all public health officials agree with the approach that our governments have taken. So one of the things I came across in the second half of 2020, we kind of talked about that if you like, that epiphany or that moment when you started to see things a bit differently. So I think it was probably about August 2020 when the Great Barrington Declaration was released by J. Bhattacharya and sort of a couple of other prominent epidemiologists. So I put my name to that, right? So I'm like, here are three world-leading experts saying, hang on, instead of what we have been doing, we should try A, B, and C. Right? And just the hit pieces and the attack dogs that were sent forth on these prominent experts, and we're supposed to listen to the experts, but well, no, we're supposed to listen to the experts the government wants us to listen to, not the other experts that disagrees with the government experts. So I kind of tune out a bit after that. I say, okay, well, I just can't believe anything that you're telling me, right? You only want to present one side, so I can go and research the other side myself. But if my starting point is if the government's trying to get me to do something, it's not necessarily because they've got my best interests at heart. They've got their best interests at heart. So it's I was probably always a bit skeptical, but it certainly made me less trusting and more skeptical.
Oh, totally. And also, I wanted to ask you, because even when we have talked about this in several ways, but there is some clear question related with how, in the case of government and media, have put us the unvaccinated. It is like, we are the bad ones. We are the ones who don't care about killing others. We are the ones who are killing grandma. But I want to ask you, Steven, are you a bad person? Have you killed grandma?
Well, I haven't killed my grandmother. She was already dead. My grandparents were long past, and whether or not I'm a bad person, it might depend on who you ask. Right? So maybe I'll put, I'll give you my mother's phone number so you can give her a call after this, and she can be the judge. But look, I just want to mind my own business and sort of keep to myself. I kind of joke around with people. Like I'm strongly introverted. So I tend to always, I'm comfortable spending time on my own and like to do my own thing. So when all this, the pandemic was hitting in full throughout 2020, I'd kind of joke around. So look, I've been social distancing since I was 12, right? So this is perfect for me. It gives me an extra reason not to see people, right? I don't have to make up an excuse. So I say I can't catch up with you. I'm busy, and I can say, oh no, government's orders. I can't, So that was interesting. But it's that kind of. What has really surprised me, we talked about it a few times, we've mentioned in this conversation, the level of obedience and compliance, and how willing people are just to hand over the decision-making to somebody else, right? And I think, and it is that personal responsibility piece, right? Because if we all do things in our life, right? So none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. We've done things, to get back to your question, are you a bad person? I've done some things that, that perhaps I shouldn't have done, that I regret even, but I did them. They weren't anybody else's fault, right? Like I take responsibility for everything that I've done. It was me, right? I was there. Nobody else made me do it. And you make a mistake, you want to learn from it, so you're a better person tomorrow than you are today. And it's just that, this idea that people could, if I just do what the government tells me to do, I'll get my freedom back, right? And they're celebrating. Like in the UK, you had Freedom Day, and we had a similar thing here, in to a lesser extent, a bit more low key. And I'm thinking, no, you didn't get your freedom back. You've been granted privileges in exchange for your obedience, right? Now, like there's a time and a place for obedience. I've got a dog. I like it when my dog's obedient. And I think, obedience is a wonderful quality in a dog, but not necessarily in an adult human being, not when it comes to just sort of blindly following the edicts of our governments.
Oh, totally. And also related to this, it is that health, it is the most important, besides time, health and time are the most important things we as humans, I think we have. And I wanted to ask you your opinion based on your background on psychology and bioethics, that what will be your answer to the question why it is not a good idea to outsource the most important decisions on your own health?
Well, I think, so I might answer this from a systemic, from a systems point of view, that like in all our countries, I don't, from my experience, we don't have a health system. We have a sick system, right? So it's a system that makes money off people being sick. It's not actually about keeping them healthy. Right, so you might have heard this line or this meme that from the point of view of a pharmaceutical company, a patient cured is a customer lost, right? So it's bad for their business model if they come up with, they might advertise things as miracle cures, but if you sell a drug, you invent some miracle drug and you cure everybody, that's it. What are you going to sell to them tomorrow, right? Like you got to find something else to give them. So I always found it interesting, because I maintain private health insurance here in Australia, and you'll get you got a subcategory of things you can claim for, like alternative medicine, right? So these are your traditional things like acupuncture, naturopathy, things that have been around for centuries, for millennia, right? And then this Western, allopathic approach to medicine and drugs, it's been around for the blink of an eye in comparison, right? Like in historical terms, it's only 15 minutes ago, these guys wanted to put leeches on everybody, right, to suck the bad out of them, right? And then the things that have been around much longer, the more traditional methods, they're called the alternative. And I'm like, no, that's what we've enjoyed for a longer part of our human history. And I'm not saying there's not a place for modern medical interventions to help with, traumatic injuries, surgical repair, that kind of thing. As an athlete, I've had multiple operations because I was always having accidents. So I was breaking things or tearing stuff. So that, there's that to consider. I also, perhaps in response to your question, I remember having a conversation a few years ago, this pre-pandemic. This was with a senior executive at Medibank. So Medibank was one of our large private health insurers. And there'd be all these stories that come around, periodic. Every year we talk about, there's these stories that come out about there's not enough hospital beds in Australia. We need to build more hospitals. We've got too many sick people and not enough beds for them. And this guy would tell you straight out, so we don't have a problem with a shortage of beds. On a per capita basis, we've got plenty of hospital beds. The problem is the more beds that we provide for, the more doctors send people to hospital, right? Because the whole machine makes money off. There's no point. You don't make money off an empty hospital bed, right? So that's just a sad reality of where profit motive and money and capitalism interplay in a sector like health, where the outcomes perhaps aren't aligned. What's good for the patient isn't necessarily what's good for that hospital system.
Yeah, one of the things that has most shocked me, thanks to all the data revealed with the pandemic, it is one, how bad is the general health level of the population all over the world. Obviously, there are some countries which are doing a little bit better, some countries are doing really, really, really bad, but in general, it is a bad health level among the population. And the other thing, it is how little people know about how their body works. I mean, people in general think that because they are able to walk or to breathe, they think they are healthy.
Well, I think so. That just reminded me of something I kind of heard in maybe it was one of the other conversations that you had. That the two, I think it depends on. So you can take the approach. I agree with what you're saying. So our modern lifestyles, we spend so much time sitting down or eating processed food, all that kind of thing. Yeah. So you want to eat healthy. You want to eat natural. You got to move around. Like, we've got legs for a reason. Like, we're mobile animals. Like, if we're supposed to sit down all day, we wouldn't need legs. So there's that to keep in mind, just in terms of using your body in a natural manner to do the things that your body is designed to do. And I think definitely what you're saying, that understanding of your body, being, if you're someone who's been involved in sport or an athlete, you've got to pay close attention to how your body's responding to whichever training you're doing, because you can push things too hard and you can damage your body. And this different in perspective, and this is sort of the point that I want to link to something I heard in one of your other conversations that I've watched online. This idea that we're not. I kind of look at it this way: that we're not. I'm not a physical body that has a soul. I'm a soul that has a physical body.
Yeah.
Right. So you're given this vehicle. I think the language that was used, I've heard used previously, is that it's a ship or it's a vessel. So I've done a lot of yoga in my time, and one of the key edicts of yoga is that so we're spiritual beings, and you've got this physical vehicle that you need to look after, because one of you're charged with not prematurely destroying the vehicle of your experience, right? So you're given this. It's like a car to drive. If you want to move around in this material world, you need a vehicle in which to do it, and if you look after it, it'll last as long as you need it to. And if you don't look after it, it's going to break down all the time, and it's going to need expensive repairs, like medical interventions and that kind of thing. So the body's just there's 1,000 generations of embodied wisdom, from subsequent generations of your lineage of humanity. So there's I kind of tie this into my philosophical studies too. There's a quote from Nietzsche: "There's more wisdom in your body than in your deepest philosophy."
Yeah.
Right. Like, the body just knows. Like, the body's had to do things just to get to where it is, so that you've got it. But we can kind of get caught up in our head and thinking we're smarter than nature, right? And this gets you into the whole, sort of transhumanism, from a bioethics perspective, transhumanism and what people want to do to augment the natural body. And some of that, some of this is still stuff I've been studying since the 90s, and some of it's got, it's interesting applications. You can enhance human performance. So that was actually what my master's thesis, my bioethics thesis was about. It was about nanotechnology and human performance enhancement. So I'd kind of, this is again 15, 20 years ago, looking at the things that scientists were working on, the kind of things they wanted to do. And I'm like, okay, I can see that might be useful. Not sure I want that. But you kind of thought, this is something, okay, if people have got the choice, what they want to do. But as we've seen with like the nanotechnology in a number of these sort of COVID shots, and we're talking about the coercion and the manipulation. It's not really presented as a choice.
Yeah,
It's
no,
sort of
but
you
yeah,
will participate in this or not. Yeah.
the problematic, I think, thing related to this kind of virtual worlds, technology, and everything related with technology, it is that, for example, the counterintuitive response to something so amazing as a virtual world, it is that because you are spending time on a fabulous virtual world, you are not helping your physical body to be healthy. So it is kind of nonsense, but most people don't realize that, I've said to many people, like, if you have a great car and you want to have your car in optimal conditions, then you take it to maintenance and you wash it and things like that. But your body, you don't do almost anything related to the health of your own body and your own mind. And then you blame healthy people for your situation, and you blame them for they are the bad guys, and we are like, come on.
Like I did, so a number of years ago, I remember reading a study that was kind of looking at which populations, which groups around the world enjoyed the greatest longevity, healthy, active lifespans, and why. Trying to get to the bottom of what the factors were that were contributing to that. And so they're looking at places like certain islands around Japan, places in southern Italy, where people could live independently and active lives, a lot longer than we can in most of the Western world. And kind of the key factors that, if my memory serves me, kind of boiled it down to three key factors that these places had in common. There was a strong sense of community, right? So people had connection to their neighbours and their local towns. They ate organically.
Yeah.
Right, there might be a lot of fish or vegetables that they were homegrown, and this was the one that perhaps stood out a bit more to me. These were environments where the land was steep, right? So they were hilly environments. So you got your activity, you got your work in, like when you opened your back door and you had to walk up the hill to collect eggs from your chickens. Yes. And then you had to walk down the hill to go to town. So just in terms of keeping the body, you don't have to tax it too much. You don't have to overstress it or be exercising, intentionally. If you're just getting some resistance, just walking around, doing your natural everyday chores, the things that you have to do, that actually was a significant contributor to having a long, happy, healthy life.
Exactly. And unfortunately, many people today just want to take a pill or an injection.
So I did, so one of the other things that the pandemic has done for me, so there were some things that I was wanting to work on, or I've been building towards for a long time. Like I wanted to get out of the city. We've kind of done that now in a small move. We wanted to get some land like further out, more remote, and build an off-grid resilient lifestyle. Like we keep chickens where we are and we've grown vegetables for a number of years, but I wanted a bit more land and to kind of unplug to the extent that I could from this kind of this system where governments, as we've seen, can easily impact your existence. So that all kind of accelerated plans, COVID. Subsequent to all that, sort of early last year now, we bought some land a lot more, about 5 hours drive from where we are, which is 100% off-grid. You pump water from the river. There's solar panels, solar batteries with a diesel generator backup. The thing I want to tie into the previous story, because this was one of the things I had in mind. I was looking for an environment. I wanted something with a bit of topography. I wanted something on the side of a hill that was a bit steep. And so we've got something that, as it happens, is very steep. It's too steep. If you listen to my partner Lynn, she's like, okay, rolling hills would have been nice, but this is a bit too much. Some of it's sort of goat track territory. And I've been up there for a few days this week, just as we're coming into, it's just the start of spring here now, moving into summer, so it's bushfire season. So you've got to get up there and look after the land, got to brush cut the grass and trim some trees. And it is, man, it's hard work just walking up and down the hill to the house. But you get your strength and your fitness just from being in that beautiful environment. It's fantastic.
Totally. I think we also agree with that, because I don't know if it is also related with age, But I remember in my 20s, every goal it was like to win recognition, to win contracts, and to do huge things, to travel and things like that. And right now it is like I want to disconnect. I want to be off grid, absolutely from everything, from everyone.
So we do have really good Wi-Fi and mobile reception there. So it's not, you can keep track of what's going on in the world, and you can work from up there if you need to. But as a city boy, it's been a really interesting experience having to learn about water pumps and power tools and generators and things that I wasn't exposed to. It's been quite rewarding. It's a completely different skill set. When your water pump's not working and you don't know why, right? And you got to pull it apart, and you got to try replacing seals and reconnecting different bits so that the water will get up the hill to the tank from the river. When you have success, it's quite rewarding. It's more rewarding than anything I ever did corporately, any big sale or big customer, because now I've got something to drink, right? And we
Yeah,
can cook,
yeah.
we can shower.
Oh, but it is amazing. I just hope that in the future, we the ones who want to live just our own lives and don't be disturbed by government or any other corporation or anything, let's just hope that we don't become the problem. Just leave us alone.
We'll see.
Hopefully,
Fingers
because
crossed.
yeah, we have one good thing here in Mexico, because if you belong to an indigenous community, then they are protected. So one way I thinking about it is to be part of them and to say legally in this area you can come here. We have our self-government here. I am now, I don't know, I am now Maya or Purepecha or whatever, but
Well, I understand you can do that today. You can identify as whatever you want to be. That's
yeah.
that's what I hear on the TV anyway.
Yeah, that is another thing. No, but great talking to you, Steven. And just I would love to ask you for one last thing, because I mean, being you in Australia, I know it is being more challenging than in almost everywhere else. So I don't know if you can say something, some message to all the unvaccinated people all around the world. We are more than 30% of more than of total population worldwide, so we are not that minority as little as we think. But I don't know, some kind of final message for our thought for our family out there.
Well, this is a question without notice, so it kind of put me on the spot a little bit. I think I just want to encourage people just to live natural, happy, healthy lives, right? Not look to other people to solve their problems. Be good to just try and be a better person tomorrow than you are today, and sort of observe natural law. Be good to your neighbour, move your body, get outdoors, eat healthy food, and that's what human beings have been doing for as long as there are human beings. And just because we've got all this technology that enables us to do things like have this video call today between Australia and Mexico, and as fantastic as that is, but once I get off this call, I'm going to go outside and clean my chicken coop or go for a walk with my dog. Just be outdoors and just get moving and stay healthy.
Amazing, Steven. Great talking to you, and hopefully we have another opportunity to talk again.
Awesome, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Bye.